one day someone is going to have to say enough. What is the NDAA? Now, the NDAA is usually a fairly good piece of legislation. It stands for the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, this National Defense Authorization Act has been passed for 51 years by Congress, and typically just funds the military. That's really good. However, hidden inside the new 2012 NDAA are sections 1021 and 1022. In a nutshell, these sections authorize the indefinite detention, without a charge, without a trial, of any person, including American citizens, on U.S. soil, and the application of the laws of war to America. So the indefinite detention, without a charge, without a trial, possible execution, and the application of the laws of war to American soil. Now, PANDA is an anti-partisan organization. Why? It passed 283 to 136 in the House and 93 to 7 in the Senate. 93 to 7. Now, Oregon you have a unique position. Out of the 7 senators who voted against the NDAA, 2 of them were Oregons. Why? And so you have a bit of a history opposing the NDAA. Now let's go a little more deeper. What is it? So the NDAA takes its authority from the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, signed by President George W. Bush shortly after 9/11, along with the Patriot Act. So here's the language from the AUMF. In general, the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determined planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on 9/11, or harbored such organizations or persons, in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. Now, it's fairly specific. It set up a national defense policy to seek retribution against those criminals who perpetrated 9/11. This is the way our justice system should work. It is retroactive. A past crime has been committed, and we are punishing that person for a past crime. Who has seen the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise? Good amount of the audience. I highly, highly recommend it. In this movie, Tom Cruise is out as a police officer for this new government, and he's looking at a wall. There's many screens, and he picks one of the screens, and one of the screens shows a man that's going to be committing a crime in the future, and he goes arrests this man and puts him in detention. And then it shows another screen, a man is going to commit a crime in the future. Arrests that man, puts him in detention. A woman is going to be committing a crime. Arrests her, puts her in detention. And he keeps detaining these people who are going to commit a crime in the future. Unfortunately, what he finds out later in the movie, those people were never going to commit a crime. Instead, they were enemies of the current regime. And he was shown those images of them going to be committing a crime because they needed to be detained. And the current regime wanted to detain those people. And so this is what we have with the NDAA, not the Authorization for Use of Military Force, which is retroactive and tied solely to 9/11. It has a targeting profile of those who planned, authorized, committed, aided, or harbored the terrorists perpetrated 9/11. Now, it's not a good piece of legislation. It opened Pandora's box. But it's not as bad as the NDAA. So what happened with the NDAA? It expanded that authority. Section 1021b2. A person who is a part of or substantially supported TAQ, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. Notice it's no longer the United States. It's a coalition partner. We have been dire enemies of Britain and coalition partners with Britain. We have been dire enemies of Iran and coalition partners with Iran. We have been dire enemies of Germany and coalition partners with Germany. Coalition partners, including any person who's committed a belligerent act. What is a belligerent act? I did a survey of about 150 college students on my campus, asked each one of them, what is a belligerent act? None of them can figure out. None of them could find out what it was. What is a belligerent act? It's not a crime. For if it was a crime, they would have listed the crime. It would have already been in place. It's not a crime, it's a belligerent act. Or directly supported such hostilities in aid of such enemy forces. I come from southeast Michigan, northwest Ohio area. In northwest Ohio, we have a charity called Kind Hearts, or used to. Kind Hearts was one of the only 3 charities in the United States that was directly funding Al-Qaeda and prosecuted for it. If somebody donated to Kind Hearts, thinking that it's a charity that's going to help out the Muslim community in the United States, but the funds actually went to Al-Qaeda, that person could be indefinitely detained under the NDAA. Direct support. Substantial support. They don't have to know. So here's the difference. Now, a lot of your representatives, although your 2 senators did excellent, a lot of your representatives voted for the NDAA. When you confront them in a town hall and you say, why did you vote for the NDAA? Why did you vote to indefinitely detain American citizens and any person in America without a charge or trial? They're going to say, oh, we didn't do that. What are you talking about? It's the same as the AUMF. So here's the difference. In NDAA 1021b1, the language from the AUMF was essentially copied and pasted. Planned, authorized, committed, aided, or harbored, still tied to 9/11, still tied to a past event. In 1021b2, however, they added this new section. Anyone who is a part of or supported TAQ that are engaged in hostilities against the U.S. or coalition partners who commits a belligerent act or directly supports such hostilities. Note, the Justice Department has, to this day, still not been able to define hostilities. So the NDAA, which is supposed to merely fund current national security policy, instead changes current national security policy. It changes the targeting profile beyond the authorization for use of military force. The AUMF applied to non-citizens outside the United States. The NDAA applies to American citizens anywhere in the world, and anyone inside the United States. As it changes the country being protected, it changes the time frame. So we've gone from a policy for retribution to a policy of pre-crime and a war on terror. So terrorism is an idea or a method. It's really not a very popular one either. Number one, you can't legislate a method out of existence or an idea. If Congress passes a law tomorrow and says, anyone who claps with their right hand on top instead of their left hand shall be thrown in prison. It is now illegal to clap with your right hand on top. A method of clapping. Is that going to stop people from clapping with their right hand on top? Absolutely not. If Congress then decides that an idea is bad and decides to legislate an idea out of existence, the color blue. The color blue no longer exists in the United States. Will the color blue then just go, okay, Congress, bye? No. You cannot legislate an idea or a method out of existence. And number two, this is a horrible idea or a method to try to legislate out of existence. Let's take a look. You are more likely to get struck by lightning twice than be killed in a terrorist attack. You are 17,600 times more likely to die from heart disease. You are 404 times more likely to die in a fall. You are unfortunately 8 times more likely to be killed by a police officer as an innocent in the line of duty than a terrorist. You are more likely to die of heat stroke than a terrorist incident. We spent billions and hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars on this war on terror. Imagine if we spent them fighting heart disease. Imagine if we spent them fighting cancer. We're going after something that not only has a dubious history. Let's go into that for a second. The history of the word terrorist. What's the dictionary definition of the word terrorist? A terrorist is someone who terrorizes a population for political gain. It is inherently a political word, meaning it can change. In 1738, the British government released a list of the top 10 things they were worried about. One of those was terrorism. 1738. Didn't start on 9/11. And 30 years later, who did the British government consider terrorists? Us. The founding fathers. The colonialists. And so this word terrorist can be used in any method whatsoever. But if you look at it, and you think about it, it is the United States government admitting they're ruling you by fear. All great dictatorships, all great monarchies ruled by fear. If they use the word terrorist instead of criminal, as it should be, they're admitting we are using terror to control you. ruling by fear. And that's why they're devoting dollars to the war on terror, instead of anything else, that has a lot more likely chance of killing us. So how is it bad? Hedges v. Obama is a case against the NDAA. It was brought on January 13th by Christopher Hedges, New York Times columnist, and 6 others, called the Freedom Seven. They sued the Obama administration. They said the NDAA is unconstitutional. You could detain us under the NDAA. They brought the case to Judge Catherine Forrest of the 4th District Court of New York. She looked at the case, and she asked the government over and over again, well, what does this mean? Well, what does that mean? What is direct support? What is substantial support? What are all of these terms? And the answer? We don't know. We can't tell you that. You have to refer to the laws of war. Oh, go ahead. Oh, we still don't know. In fact, she got so tired of the government going back and forth and telling her they didn't know that she laid out a scenario in front of them. She said, let's say someone writes a book. And this book is purely fiction. Purely fiction, there's nothing fact in it. But in the front cover of the book they wrote, I support the political goals of Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Could that person be indefinitely detained? They go, we don't know. Could these plaintiffs, she asked them point blank, could these plaintiffs who are bringing suit be indefinitely detained? Government goes, we don't know.